Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Practicing Normal by Cara Achterberg. Narrated by Exie Sands, Andi Arndt, and Charles Constant. Kate. Waving to Jenna as she waits at the bus stop, all I can think is please let her go to school today, and stay in school all day. Jenna is such a smart girl. I don't understand why she doesn't apply herself to her studies. She could be anything, a doctor even. I was a nurse, but Jenna is smarter than me. Of course, that was 20 years ago, before I married Everett, before Jenna and JT were born, before we ever lived in Pine Estates. I was the one who chose the house. Everett thought it was pretentious, and it was. All the houses on our end of Pine Road were pretentious. But it was the 90s. Everyone was building McMansions and taking out ridiculous loans to pay for them. Everett had just left his job as a police officer for the job at FABSO, Family and Business Security Options. We needed to start a new life. We celebrated the new job and didn't talk about the fact that things could have turned out very differently if his captain had chosen to bring charges against him. Instead, he recommended Everett for the job at FABSO and made it clear Everett would be wise to take it. I remember lying in bed holding Everett the day he turned in his gun and his badge. He was devastated. Being a cop had been Everett's dream since childhood. All I ever wanted to be is a cop. If I can't be a cop, who am I? You're a father and a husband. That's so much more, I told him. He didn't say anything about it again. He got to work. He made something of FABSO, and he's tried so hard to be a good dad. I don't remember much about my own dad. And whenever I asked my mother, she would say, there's nothing to remember about that louse except that he was a louse. When I pressed her later, after I'd grown up, she'd said, it doesn't matter now. He didn't want to be with us enough to stay. All that bitterness can't hide the fact that when my father left, he apparently took my mother's heart. She spent the rest of her life alone, except for me and Evelyn. Although once Evelyn left home, she didn't come around much. These days she visits Mama on Saturdays, unless she has something more pressing to do, which is most weeks. Mama annoys her. I suppose I do, too. We don't fit into Evelyn's shiny, perfect life. When I first met Everett and told Mama about him, she was skeptical. A cop? I told her how he'd wanted to be a cop since he was a little boy, the same way I always wanted to be a nurse. I gushed about how he told me I was beautiful, and how he said he'd been certain about us the first time he saw me. Mama said, men will say whatever it takes, Kate. When will you realize that? But I knew she was wrong about Everett. I met Everett in the ER. I was treating a patient who was high on coke or meth or God knows what. He was lean and riddled with track marks, his strength coming from whatever drug was flooding his body. I didn't recognize him as one of our regulars, the ones who showed up like clockwork in search of pain meds. This guy was out of his mind and covered in his own blood from where he'd scratched his thin skin. Another nurse helped me to strap him to the gurney with the Velcro holds, but he was out of his mind and reached for the needle I was about to use to sedate him. Everett was nearby at the desk filling out forms and heard me yell. In just moments, he wrestled the junkie to the ground and held him still as I plunged the needle in. When the man finally collapsed, Everett lifted him back onto the gurney and secured him. When he turned and looked at me with his green eyes, the same eyes Jenna has, I knew I would marry him. I told him that on our second date. He laughed. I've always loved his laugh. When Everett started at FABSO, he made nearly twice the salary he'd made as a cop. I didn't need to work any longer. It was our chance. I would stay home and take care of our happy family and our beautiful house in Pine Estates. It was our new start. I thought we belonged there. When I opened the door to Mama's house, she's already calling for me. She may be losing her mind, but her hearing hasn't deteriorated one bit. You're late, she scolds. Sorry, JT had a hard time picking out a shirt to wear today. He's not a baby. I don't know why you put up with it. I smile at her. No sense taking the bait. You're right, Mama. We've always been so indecisive. I swear if I didn't tell you what to do next, you'd stand there like a statue. Good thing you're so good at telling me what to do, I mutter as I go to prepare her tea. Mama wasn't always like this. When Evelyn and I were little, she was our whole world. She baked homemade cakes for our birthdays and elaborately decorated them with whatever we were currently obsessing over. Tinkerbell, Barbies, guitars, or for Evelyn, a computer one year, and the scales of justice the year she announced she was going to be a judge when she grew up. Mama read to us every night. I remember snuggling into the crook of her arm, even when I was too old to be doing it. Evelyn would be on her other side, and our hands would meet on Mama's flat tummy. I loved the stories with a happy ending, but Evelyn demanded that she read real books. She wanted mysteries and thrillers instead of the children's books Mama picked out at the library. So Mama began to read Nancy Drew, but Evelyn went to the adult aisle and picked out John Grisham, Tom Clancy, and Stephen King. Mama tried to read them to us. She'd come to a part that she felt was too racy for us, and she'd hum while she skimmed ahead till she found a more appropriate section before beginning to read again. This drove Evelyn nuts. She'd pout and complain, eventually stomping off. Mama would return the books to the library unread, but it wasn't long before Evelyn was old enough to have her own library card and check them out for herself. In the mornings, Mama would braid our hair, pack our lunches with tiny handwritten notes, and walk us to the bus stop for more years than was appropriate. When Evelyn reached high school, she demanded that Mama stop, but she still followed us with her car and waited to be certain we got on the bus safely. Now that I'm a mom, I know it couldn't have been easy raising us alone. As she's gotten older, she's gotten difficult. But I put up with her increasing number of quirks because I feel I owe her. Evelyn doesn't see it that way. But then again, Evelyn doesn't feel she owes anybody anything. Here you go. I hand Mama the bitter Earl Grey tea she likes oversteeped with no sweetener. I've already missed Philip, she says as I help her out the door to the back porch. She spends most mornings there, talking to the birds that frequent her multiple bird feeders. Who's Philip? I ask, mostly to make conversation. She loves to talk about the birds. The look she gives me is just like the one JT gives me when my random wow comes at the wrong time in one of his lengthy soliloquies on his current obsession. Philip is the male cardinal who has begun stopping by each morning. He comes over the fence from the southeast. He's usually here before the chickadees move in and take over the bird bath. I look at the crowd of birds fighting over the seed at the feeder. They all look the same to me. I've got to take care of a few things at home after I run JT to school. I'll be back at lunchtime. Always leaving me, she complains. You can't even spend 5 minutes with your mother. I'd protest, but there's no point. She sees things the way she needs to see them. Rewriting history is one of her specialties. I've been listening to her do it all my life. When Everett and I took the kids to the beach last summer, she said, "Must be nice. I've never had a vacation." Yet I remember several summers when Mama took Evelyn and me to the same beach we were headed to. Or when I graduated from nursing school, Mama said, "I've always said you'd make a fine nurse." When in reality, she'd been telling me for years that I could never be a nurse because I was so weak at chemistry. She thought I should have considered something in business, like being a secretary. She's been spinning her stories of Evelyn's escapades, my mistakes, and my father's general louse-likeness for so long she probably believes them as gospel truth. They are, I suppose, at least to her mind. I hurry home, hoping JT has finally decided on a shirt for school. We're going to be late if we have to argue about it.
Jenna. I wave to Mom as she drives past on her way to Graham's house. I don't know why she drives. It's a perfectly nice day, and Graham only lives a couple blocks up the street. She lives in the old part, where the houses are pretty much all one-story brick numbers with window boxes full of plastic flowers. Old people live there, or young people without much money. Our end of the street is for the rich people. Not that we're rich people. We just pretend to be. Everett, my dad, makes decent money, I'm pretty sure, but nothing like the money Mr. Braddington pulls in. I should know. I spend plenty of time in the Braddingtons' house. And today that's where I'll go just as soon as my mom's car is out of sight, but before the bus pulls up to take me to school. I don't see the point of school. Bunch of idiots there. And not just the students. The teachers aren't such a bright bunch either. It's a waste of my time. I'm sure I'll catch hell for it from Everett, but I can't stomach the jerks today. I grab my backpack and double-time it to the Braddingtons' house. I know it's empty. On a day like today, Mrs. Braddington will be on the golf course, teeing off. Wells and Tiffany will have already left in Wells's fancy Corvette, headed to school. I don't know why they go to the public school. I'm sure the Braddingtons could afford the country day school. Wells is a junior, like me. He's a big deal on the football team, and a state-ranked wrestler. Plus, he runs track. The guy is your all-American dream, if that's what you're into. Tiffany is a freshman. She made waves when she started at Kramer High. Everyone knows she modeled for J. Crew as a kid. She's cardboard pretty and already hangs with the mean girls in my grade. I guess she's too good to be an actual freshman. I've seen the pictures of Tiffany in the J. Crew catalogs. They're blown up poster size and plastered all over the Braddingtons' house. There are pictures of Wells, also. In most pictures, he's holding a trophy. He's always been beautiful, too. That's how I think of all of them. The beautiful Braddingtons. Alliteration, see? I wasn't snoozing through English class last week. The Braddingtons have an alarm system, but it's easy to get around. The control box for the alarm system is in the garage, which has a cat door for their overly obese cat. They've had to enlarge it twice. The cat happened into the right family. It's diabetic, and Mrs. Braddington gives it shots every day. I've seen the meds and the instructions on the counter. Getting into the Braddingtons is easy as pie. I'm small enough to get through the cat door. I found their security code the first time I stopped in, but even if I hadn't, I could easily disarm their system since the box is right there next to the door. I could simply pull the wires to the phone and power. I don't need either. I learned how to disarm home systems from following Everett around on his job when I was little. He works for a security company. He's even made geeky YouTube videos. In one of them, he dresses up like a repair guy and shows a customer how a burglar could easily break into his house. He overacts ridiculously, as if he's some Hollywood star. They still use that video on cable channel advertising. Embarrassing for all of us, but Everett actually watches it pretty much every time it airs. Today at the Braddingtons' house, I fix a big bowl of ice cream, peanut butter swirl, and take it to the window seat that looks out over the backyard, which includes a fancy outdoor kitchen, a pool shaped like a tennis racket with a hot tub on the handle. You can swim between the two, and a golf tee with an enormous backstop. The Braddingtons also have the biggest bird feeder I've ever seen. It looks like an old-fashioned hotel with a tin roof and dozens of balconies where the feed comes out. A neon sign on the top of it says, "Fly right in," and holds the extra bird food that automatically refills the feeder whenever it gets low. My Gram would probably kill to have a feeder like that. I've thought about stealing it for her, but then the bees would probably figure out someone's been here. Gram is crazy about birds. As in, she's so crazy she thinks she can talk to birds, and they talk to her. I like to mess with my mom sometimes and say shit like, maybe she can talk to birds. How would we know? We don't speak bird. That's ridiculous, Jenna. No one talks to birds. Sure they do. People talk to birds all the time. Which is true, right? Your grandmother is getting old. She's confused. She cannot communicate with birds. I just think we aren't experts. It's possible. People talk to dolphins all the time. It's not the same. Sure it is. It doesn't help your Gram to encourage it. She's struggling to keep her mind sound as she ages. This is Mom's way of saying Gram is going nuts. Mom should know, since she spends every day over there taking care of her. If anyone's crazy, it's Mom. She has no life because she has to be there to feed Gram all her meals and clean every possible speck that ever lands in her house, or Gram will start yelling about the mess. She's better off outside talking to the birds. Her yard has a 10-foot privacy fence, about 15 bird feeders that Mom fills every day, and 4 bird baths. If I were Mom, I'd park Gram out there first thing in the morning and come back after dark to roll her back inside. I finish up my ice cream and take my English book to the chaise lounge in the sunroom. That's my favorite room in the house. Before I go, I'll wash my dishes and put everything back the way it was, reset the alarm, and slip back out the cat door. Maybe today I'll visit the 7 dwarfs over at Ms. Cassie's place.
Kate, I've just finished cleaning up Mama's lunch dishes and settled her down for a nap when Everett calls. You need to get over to the Braddingtons' house. What? Why? I ask. Susan Braddington and I aren't really friends. They live across the street, but I've only been in their house once. Back when we first moved in, I tried in vain to get to know Susan. The Braddingtons are the only family with children on our end of the street. Our kids are nearly the same ages, and when we moved in, I imagined us becoming best friends, sharing mornings at the bus stop and afternoons at the Braddingtons' pool. Susan has always been pleasant enough, politely refusing every invitation I made. Sometimes I wonder if it's because of JT. The one and only time I've been in their house was the day JT got upset about something I can't even recall. He was probably about 4. He'd run blindly across the road and up their driveway. I'd chased him, but he was fast. Finally, he tripped over the low stone wall that banks their driveway. His knee was bleeding. It wasn't a big deal, not really, but Susan Braddington heard him crying and came out to help. She invited us in to wash the cut, but when she approached JT with a can of first aid spray, he began shrieking and kicked a dent in their drywall. I tried to explain, but it was impossible over JT screaming, so I picked him up and carried him home. I sent Everett over to offer to repair the drywall, but Susan insisted there was no need. Since then, the Braddingtons always wave whenever we see each other, but they never stop, never chat. Why in heaven's name was Everett insisting I had to go there now?
I don't know, but Jenna is there, and so are the police.
Oh, my God. I dropped Mama's soup bowl in the sink with a clatter. So much for Jenna going to school and staying there.
What is it?
Screeches Mama.
I'm trying to reach one of my buddies at the department to figure out what she did and what can be done, says Everett.
Katie, what happened? Don't ignore me. I'll go there now, I tell him. I grab my purse and tell Mama, it's nothing. Take your nap. I'll be back in time for dinner. I can hear her calling to me as I race out the door. As I drive to the Braddingtons' house, I try to apply some lipstick, glancing in the rearview mirror. My hair looks terrible, yanked into a haphazard bun this morning while arguing with JT about his shirt. It had taken nearly the whole morning to get him dressed and then over to the school. He'd insisted I walk him in, even though that was one of the skills the teachers wanted him to master by now, walking into the building by himself. He'd refused to even get out of the car alone. If you make me, I'll have an MI, he'd said. JT, like most kids with Asperger syndrome, has an obsession. Currently, it's emergency medicine. He streams medical dramas nonstop and throws medical jargon into his conversations. Because I was an ER nurse, I know that an MI is a myocardial infarction. You won't have a heart attack because you walk into the school building alone. You can do this, JT. You're too old for me to walk you in. Besides, you're over an hour late. Only 'cause you made me take my stupid pills. They're unnecessary and dangerous. You have to take your meds before school. They help your focus. We've talked about all of this. Those meds make my BP go sky high. They do not raise your blood pressure, but you are most certainly raising mine. JT smiled then. He'd done it, found a way to work his newest code into the conversation. There's no need for a BMW. Most days, I'm willing to play his game. It's harmless, really, and besides, he's expanding his knowledge base and his vocabulary. Mrs. Fall would be proud. BMW stands for bitch, moan, and whine. I'm not even sure which program he'd picked the term up from. It might be from one of the paramedic blogs he's been following. There most certainly is going to be a reason for me to have a BMW if you don't get your tail into that school. JT grinned. Just today, can't you go with me? Otherwise, I'm AGMI. I couldn't help but laugh. AGMI stands for Ain't Gonna Make It. He explained that to me last night. I'd never heard it before, but I suppose text messages are increasing the number of acronyms medical personnel use. This is the last time, I said, and got out of the car. When GT reached for my hand on the sidewalk, I shoved it in my pocket, even though I wanted to hold his hand as much as he wanted to hold mine. The school counselor's voice rang in my head. It's really not appropriate for a 12-year-old boy to be holding his mother's hand when he walks in the building. That's what we're working on here, Mrs. Turner. We're trying to help John Thomas learn to function in a regular classroom. I drive up the Braddingtons' curvy driveway as fast as I dare. A police car is parked in their turnaround. The house is the same distance from the road as ours, but the driveway is twice as long, snaking back and forth with that expensive stone wall guiding it. Before I can ring the bell, Susan Braddington opens the door. "Kate, hello. Sorry to see you under these circumstances." Her face is made up perfectly, and she smiles at me in the curious way she does whenever we run into each other at the school or the store, and I say, "We really should get together." Yes, hi, Susan," I stammer, glancing past her into the empty foyer. I don't see Jenna. This has something to do with Jenna? "I'll let the officer explain," she says, and leads me down the hall to the cavernous kitchen. Jenna is sitting on a stool at the counter, looking bored. I don't know if I should hug her or not. Has something happened to her or to Susan? I place a hand on Jenna's shoulder and feel her shrink away from it. "What's going on?" "You're Mrs. Turner?" asks the officer. He looks much younger than Everett. He might have worked under him at some point years ago. I notice the brown-stained fingers as he holds his notepad. A smoker. Everett would never have shared a car with him. He can't stand smokers. "I am. I hate that I'm trembling. Authority figures tend to reduce me to an anxious puddle. Maybe that's part of the reason Everett still has such an effect on me physically. Even if I'm furious with him, I can rarely resist him in the bedroom. It's silly to be so nervous because I know that this officer is really just somebody's son or husband dressed up in a uniform that has to be dry cleaned every week. The badge glares at me. I try to focus on the officer's face, smooth, as if he's just shaved or is too young to need to. "Did you know your daughter was not in school today?" Was that what this was about? Relief washes over me. Maybe Susan found Jenna and knew she was supposed to be in school. I wish Susan had just called my cell phone. I wrote the number on the invitation I'd sent them at the end of summer. I'd invited the Braddingtons for a cookout, but Susan never RSVP'd. I couldn't bring myself to call and ask if they were coming. That seemed too desperate. I don't know why I care about being friends with them. Maybe it's silly, but I've always dreamed of living in a neighborhood where the neighbors got together for cookouts, traded recipes, and watched each other's pets when they went on vacation. Pine Estates looks like such a friendly place, but we've been here 8 years, and I have yet to find any friends on this street. Still, I haven't given up hope. I know these things take time. Everett doesn't understand this. Why would you want to be friends with him anyway, out there in their big house on the hill with that ridiculous driveway? When they didn't show up, I took the extra burgers I'd made to Mama's to freeze for easy dinners in the microwave. "Mrs. Braddington came home and discovered your daughter crawling through the cat door of their garage." "Oh?" I can think of no other response. I'm stunned. Why would Jenna want to get in their garage? "Well," asks Susan, clearly expecting me to give some response. All I can hear is Everett's voice. "Don't you know what your own daughter is doing?" "I'm sorry. I thought Jenna was in school." I turned to Jenna. "Why were you in the Braddingtons' garage?" Jenna shrugs. "What happens next?" I asked the officer, not meeting Susan's accusatory eyes. "I've written a report. I'll have to file that. Is there anything else that will turn up when I run her information through the system?" I don't know. I say this because I don't. I know that Jenna had gotten in trouble a while back for sneaking into an electronics store and watching television, but Everett said he'd taken care of that. Jenna hadn't taken anything or broken anything getting in, so there wasn't a real crime, he'd said. He'd even seemed somewhat impressed that Jenna could do it without tripping the alarm system. He'd grilled her on how she'd gotten in. "Well, Mrs. Braddington is reserving the right to press charges depending on whether Mr. Braddington discovers that anything is missing from the garage." "I don't know what he keeps in there," explained Susan, crossing her arms and frowning. "So I can take Jenna home?" "For now, but we may need you to bring her down to the station if there are charges." Jenna gets up from the stool and walks silently past me. "I'm really sorry," I say to Susan. "I don't know what she was doing here. It won't happen again, I promise." Susan Braddington says nothing to me. Instead, she takes the officer's arm.
I really appreciate your prompt response. It's good to know we have such excellent police coverage in Pine Estates. No problem, ma'am. I let myself out. Jenna is walking across Bradington's expansive, expensive lawn. At the bottom, she stops to kick a beautiful, blooming yellow mum, scattering bright petals across the grass. I could yell at her, but that wouldn't help. If Susan Bradington saw what she'd done, she'd probably be even more upset than she was about finding Jenna in her garage. Back at the house, Jenna parks herself on the couch, surfing through the channels on the television. I'll drive you to school now. We can talk about this when your father gets home. There's no point in me going. Her tone is one she might use with a young child. I sigh. There's still an hour left. Jenna doesn't respond. She stares at the television. I don't know what else to do. Everett will deal with her. I drive back to Mama's. I left laundry in the washing machine. Walking in the door with JT, later I can already hear Everett and Jenna going at it. What the hell is the matter with you? Answer me. Are you a frickin' zombie or something? You can't answer a simple question. They're in the living room. Jenna is right where I left her nearly 3 hours earlier, on the couch with remote in hand. Only now there are empty glasses and dishes scattered on the coffee table, so she's moved at least. Jenna stares straight ahead. She pauses her movie in deference to her father, or maybe because she can't hear it above his screaming. Let's talk about this later when everyone's calm, I say, clearing the dishes from the coffee table. Don't touch those dishes. She can get her lazy ass up and take them to the kitchen. She might not want to answer my questions, but you're not her damn maid. At his words, Jenna gets up and picks up the only dish I'm not holding. Without looking at either of us, she goes to the kitchen. Yelling at her doesn't work, I say to Everett. He knows this as well as I do. No, you're right, it doesn't. Maybe I should beat her ass, he says and stomps out of the room. I know he doesn't really mean that. He would never hit our children. We talked about that years ago when I was first pregnant with Jenna. Back then, it seemed so simple. We would love our little girl, she would love us. How difficult could that be? The screen door slams behind Jenna. I watch her go and am relieved to see her settle on a swing in the backyard. She sways back and forth slowly, her feet dragging on the ground as she positions her earbuds and selects music from her phone. At least she isn't prowling the neighborhood. I find JT in his room, lying under his bed. Only the bottoms of his feet are visible. Hey, what did you want to show me? JT had been insistent that he wanted me to see something when we got home. Is Daddy done yelling? His voice is muffled. I think so, for now. He's pretty upset. What about? Nothing big. He's just frustrated with Jenna. 'Cause she won't tell him why she breaks into houses? What? How do you know she breaks into houses? JT emerges from beneath the bed. She told me. She told you? Yeah, I wanted to go with her, but she said that wasn't a good idea. But she brought me something once. JT goes to his closet. He pulls out a box from behind the pants and jackets hanging there. He likes to wear coats that fall below his knees and has amassed a collection of them. He opens the box and pulls out a hospital bracelet. He holds it up for me to see. I can just barely make out the name, Baby Boy Asher. The bracelet belongs to the Ashers, a couple who live 2 houses up from us. I barely know them. I did take them some bread when they first moved in, and then a set of bibs when they had their baby. They never even sent a thank you note. I guess they're busy. Both parents work, so they aren't home very much. When they were away this past summer, they hired Jenna to feed their fish and bring in their mail. JT, this doesn't belong to us. It's probably very special to the Ashers. So? He pulls the bracelet close to him. Jenna gave it to me. It's from a real hospital. I don't know what to say. Everett will go ballistic if he finds out. Why would Jenna steal their baby bracelet? Maybe the Ashers gave it to her. I remember why I'd come to JT's room in the first place. What was it you wanted to show me?
JT grins and runs to his desk. He opens his backpack and pulls out a stack of papers. They're medical.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?